Without remorse, he left his sick, suffering black wife to start over with his pregnant mistress. But on the day of the will reading, his blood ran cold with the final revelation. The email notification flashed on Sarah Morgan's tablet screen as she absently stirred her morning coffee. The gentle ping might as well have been a thunderclap in the stillness of her kitchen, a sound that would divide her life into before and after. Outside, an early April frost had settled over their meticulously landscaped garden in Beacon Hill, the premium Boston suburb where she and William had lived for the past 13 years. The roses she'd planted herself, nurtured through countless seasons, glistened with ice crystals that caught the morning light. "One sec, finishing this email," William called from his study, his voice carrying the casual confidence of a man whose world was perfectly ordered. "Dr. William Morgan, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital, husband of 16 years, and, as Sarah was about to discover, exceptional liar." Sarah hadn't meant to read the message. The tablet had been William's, left carelessly on the marble countertop before he'd rushed to answer a call from the hospital. Or at least, that's what he'd said the call was about. The reservation confirmation that now filled the screen told a different story. Whispering Pines Cabin Retreat, confirmation for 2 Vermont luxury weekend, special instructions, champagne and strawberries upon arrival. For a moment, Sarah simply stared, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. The dates aligned precisely with the cardiology conference William had mentioned last week, the one he'd lamented having to attend alone over their anniversary weekend. "Unavoidable timing," he'd said, kissing her forehead. "We'll celebrate when I return, I promise." Sarah's fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating before scrolling down to reveal the rest of the message. A special note had been added to the reservation. "Mr. Morgan has requested rose petals scattered across the bed and a view of the lake as discussed in previous correspondence. The romance package has been added complimentary for returning guests." Returning guests. Sarah felt the floor shift beneath her feet as 13 years of trust collapsed. Her eyes caught her reflection in the window glass, a 48-year-old woman with elegant features framed by dark hair, now streaked with premature grey, her skin paler than usual from the chemotherapy treatments that had begun 3 weeks ago. Acute myeloid leukemia. The diagnosis had come like a death sentence until William had held her close in the oncologist's office and whispered, "We'll fight this together." Every step of the way. "Sorry about that," William said suddenly in the doorway. At 52, he remained impressively handsome, tall and fit with distinguished silver temples that only enhanced his authority. His surgical precision extended to his appearance, perfectly knotted tie, crisp white shirt, tailored slacks even on his day off. "The Johnson transplant case is giving Patterson some trouble. I told him to—" He stopped abruptly, noticing Sarah's expression, and then, with a quick darting of his eyes, the tablet still glowing between them. For one unguarded moment, panic flashed across his face before he composed himself. "Sarah, I can explain." The words came out with practiced calm, the same tone he likely used when telling families there had been complications in surgery. "I'm sure you can," Sarah replied, her voice surprisingly steady. She'd been a professor of American literature at Boston University for over 20 years, specializing in narratives of betrayal from Hawthorne to modern fiction. How ironic that she hadn't recognized the signs in her own marriage. "You've always been excellent at explanations, William." She slid the tablet toward him, noting how his manicured fingers, hands that had held hers during her first chemo session, hands that had literally saved lives, almost imperceptibly trembled. "It's not what it seems," he began, but the words hung hollow in the kitchen's sudden chill. "Is it a medical conference that requires champagne and rose petals on the bed?" Sarah asked. "Or is that a new treatment protocol I'm unfamiliar with?" William's face hardened slightly. He'd never appreciated sarcasm, not even in their better days. "This isn't the time for this conversation. You're not well and when would be an appropriate time?" Sarah cut in, surprising herself with the edge in her voice. "After my next chemotherapy session? When I'm too exhausted to question why my husband is planning romantic getaways while I'm fighting for my life?" The thickness of silence settled between them, broken only by the steady tick of the antique grandfather clock in the hallway, a wedding gift from William's parents, both long deceased. Time measuring out the disintegration of a marriage in precise, relentless increments. William ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, a rare gesture of discomfort from a man so composed. "Her name is Rebecca," he finally said, as if offering a concession. "She's a pharmaceutical representative. It's been going on for about 8 months. 8 months. The time frame hit Sarah like a physical blow. 8 months ago, they'd been celebrating his nomination for chief of surgery. 8 months ago, they'd hosted a dinner party where he'd raised a toast to "my brilliant wife, the foundation of everything I've accomplished." 8 months ago, before the unexplained late nights, before the persistent fatigue that had finally driven her to the doctor, before the diagnosis that had shattered their carefully constructed world. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Sarah asked, her academic mind still functioning through the emotional chaos, cataloguing details, noting inconsistencies. "Or was I supposed to conveniently never discover that my husband has been leading a double life?" William's expression shifted to something resembling remorse, but with a calculation behind it that Sarah now recognized had always been there. "I never meant to hurt you. This thing with Rebecca, it just happened. And then when you got sick, I couldn't add to your burden." "How considerate," Sarah whispered, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "Protecting me from the burden of knowing the truth." She moved to the window, needing distance, needing air. Outside, the neighborhood was coming alive with morning routines. The Hendersons walking their golden retriever, Dr. Abrams backing his Tesla out of his driveway. Normal life continuing while her world imploded. "Is she young?" Sarah asked suddenly, still facing the window. William hesitated. "Sarah, does it matter?" "It matters to me." She turned back to him, forcing herself to look directly into his eyes that had once looked at her with genuine love, or so she had believed. "She's 34, he admitted, 14 years younger than Sarah. Old enough to be taken seriously, young enough to still have children, the children William had claimed he never wanted, the children Sarah had given up the dream of having because of his insistence that their lives were full enough without them. "Does she know about me? About my diagnosis?" Sarah pressed, each question feeling like pressing on a bruise, painful but necessary to understand the full extent of the injury. William looked away. "She knows I'm married, and that you're unwell." "Unwell," Sarah repeated, almost laughing at the clinical euphemism. "That's one way to describe stage 3 cancer." She moved to the kitchen island, steadying herself against it as a wave of nausea swept through her, not from the chemotherapy this time, but from the sickening realization of how completely she had been deceived. "I need you to leave," she said quietly. William straightened, his doctor's authority reasserting itself. "You're upset, understandably. But you're also in treatment, and you shouldn't be alone right now. I've taken time off to be here for your next session on Thursday, and—" "How magnanimous," Sarah cut in, "to pencil me in between your affair and your surgeries." She looked up at him, really looked, seeing the stranger beneath the familiar face. "Does Rebecca know you're still playing the devoted husband? Or is she under the impression that you're leaving me?" A flicker of something, guilt perhaps, or simply annoyance at being caught, crossed William's face. "It's complicated. I'm a literature professor, William. I understand complexity. What I don't understand is lying to someone you've shared a life with for 16 years. William's phone buzzed in his pocket. He reached for it automatically, then stopped himself, but not before Sarah caught the flash of a name on the screen. "You should get that," she said coldly. "Rebecca might need to finalize the dinner reservations for your romantic getaway." "This isn't fair," William said, his voice hardening. "I've supported you through everything. I've built this life for us. One mistake doesn't erase 16 years. 8 months isn't a mistake," Sarah replied. "It's a choice, made repeatedly, and apparently with enough frequency to earn you returning guest status at Whispering Pines." The grandfather clock chimed 9 times, startling them both with its intrusion. William glanced at his watch, a habit so familiar it made Sarah's chest ache with the normalcy of it. "I have surgeries scheduled all day," he said, reaching for his briefcase by the door. "We should discuss this later when we're both calmer. You have enough to deal with right now." "How thoughtful of you to be concerned about my well-being now," Sarah said. William paused at the door, his expression unreadable. "I do love you, Sarah. That hasn't changed." "Love without honesty isn't love," she replied. "It's just another fiction." After he left, Sarah remained motionless in the kitchen, the silence wrapping around her like a shroud. Her eyes fell on the framed photograph above the fireplace, their wedding day, both of them laughing as they ran through a shower of rice, the future bright with promise. She remembered how William had looked at her that day, how she'd felt like the center of his universe. The memory contrasted cruelly with the present reality. She was no longer at the center of anything, merely an inconvenient complication in William's carefully choreographed life. And now she had cancer, a betrayal by her own body that mirrored the betrayal by her husband. The nausea returned, stronger this time. Sarah barely made it to the bathroom before retching violently into the toilet. Afterward, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. The woman looking back at her seemed older suddenly, her eyes haunted by knowledge she couldn't unlearn. The house phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the silence. Sarah considered letting it go to voicemail, but finally picked up on the fourth ring. "Sarah, it's Miranda from Dr. Patel's office," came the cheerful voice of her oncologist's assistant. "Just confirming your appointment tomorrow at 2. Dr. Patel wanted me to check if Dr. Morgan will be accompanying you again." Sarah closed her eyes, steadying herself against the wall. "No," she said after a moment. "Dr. Morgan has other commitments." "Oh," a brief pause. "Well, do you have someone else who can drive you home? The new medication combination can cause significant fatigue and dizziness." Sarah thought of her colleagues, her friends, people who would drop everything if she called, people who didn't know yet that her perfect marriage was a charade, that while she battled cancer, her husband was planning romantic weekends with his mistress. "I'll arrange something," she said finally. So after hanging up, Sarah moved to her study, the one room in the house that was entirely hers. Unlike William's sleek, minimalist office, her space was warm with overflowing bookshelves and comfortable chairs. She sank into her favorite reading chair and picked up her own phone. There were 3 missed calls from Marianne Bennett, her closest friend and fellow professor in the English department. Sarah had been avoiding social calls since her diagnosis, unwilling to face pity or well-meaning, but exhausting encouragement. Now, she realized, she would need allies. She dialed Marianne's number, her finger hovering over the call button. What would she say? "My husband's having an affair while I'm doing chemotherapy." How pathetically Lifetime movie her life had suddenly become. The phone slipped from her hand as another realization hit her: their finances, their joint accounts. The mortgage on this house, her medical bills mounting with each treatment. If William left, when William left, what would happen to her? Her professor's salary alone wouldn't cover the expenses of cancer treatment, even with insurance. A cold, practical fear settled alongside the emotional devastation. She was facing not only heartbreak and illness, but potential financial ruin as well. Sarah moved to William's study, a space she rarely entered. The room was impeccable, every surface gleaming, papers perfectly aligned, not a pen out of place. Like William himself, it presented an immaculate facade. But what secrets might it contain? She hesitated only briefly before opening his desk drawer. Inside, organized with surgical precision, were their financial documents, bank statements, investment reports, property deeds. Sarah began methodically reviewing them, her academic training helping her focus despite the emotional turmoil. What she found sent a new wave of shock through her system. Their joint checking account, which should have contained over $200,000, now showed just under $25,000. Transfers had been systematically made to another account, one she didn't recognize, over the past 6 months. The most recent transfer had occurred 3 days ago, $15,000 with the memo line blank. Sarah's hands shook as she set down the statements. This wasn't just an affair. This was premeditation. William wasn't just betraying her heart. He was preparing to abandon her entirely, financially, emotionally, completely. As the realization crystallized, Sarah felt something unexpected replace the shock and hurt. Rage. Pure, clarifying rage that burned through the fog of betrayal and illness. The grandfather clock chimed 10 times as Sarah Morgan, literature professor, cancer patient, betrayed wife, made a decision that would alter the course of not just her life, but William's as well. She reached for her phone again, this time with steady hands, and dialed a number she'd never thought she'd need. "Harrison and Associates, Family Law. How may I direct your call?" "I need to speak with an attorney," Sarah said, her voice clear and determined. "Regarding a divorce." Outside, the April sun had finally broken through the morning frost. In the garden, her roses remained frozen, beautiful, but damaged at the core, much like the life she had believed in until today. But beneath the frost, unseen and resilient, the roots remained alive. waiting for the coming thaw. The May afternoon sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting harsh shadows across the treatment room. Sarah watched the clear liquid drip steadily through the IV line into her arm, each drop carrying poison that would hopefully save her life while systematically destroying parts of it. 3 weeks had passed since the discovery of William's affair, and her body was beginning to show the cumulative effects of the aggressive chemotherapy regimen. "Your counts are lower than we'd like," Dr. Anika Patel said, reviewing the chart at the foot of Sarah's recliner. At 45, Dr. Patel carried herself with a quiet confidence that had immediately earned Sarah's trust. Unlike some oncologists who maintained professional distance, Dr. Patel's dark eyes reflected genuine concern as she continued, "The nausea has been worse this cycle?" Sarah nodded, watching as the doctor made notes. "I can barely keep water down some days. And you're alone today?" Dr. Patel glanced toward the door, where William had sat during the first 2 treatments, his presence both comforting and necessary, as Sarah had been too weak to drive herself home afterward. "My friend Marianne is in the waiting room," Sarah replied, grateful that her question needed no further explanation. She hadn't told Dr. Patel about the disintegration of her marriage. There was something humiliating about admitting that her husband had chosen this particular moment in her life to reveal his infidelity. Dr. Patel nodded, making another note. "We should discuss adjusting your anti-nausea protocol, and I'm concerned about your weight loss. Nearly 8 pounds since last week." Sarah glanced down at her body, noticing how her once well-fitting linen pants now hung loosely around her hips. She'd been a slender woman before, but now her collarbones protruded sharply, and her wedding ring slipped easily around her finger. She'd stopped wearing it 3 days ago, leaving it in the jewelry box where William might or might not notice its absence. "I'll try those protein shakes you recommended," Sarah offered. "Good." Dr. Patel pulled up a stool beside her. "Sarah, forgive me for being direct, but as your doctor, I need to know what's happening in your life. Your blood pressure is elevated, you're showing signs of insomnia, and your cortisol levels suggest significant stress beyond what we typically see with treatment alone." Sarah looked away, focusing on the Boston skyline visible through the window. From this height, she could see the Charles River winding through the city, boats leaving white trails on its surface. Life continuing its normal rhythms while hers had been suspended between illness and betrayal. "My husband is having an affair," she said finally, the words still strange on her tongue. "He's been having it for 8 months. I found out the day before my last treatment." Dr. Patel's expression remained professionally composed, but her eyes flashed with what might have been anger. "I see. And he's no longer accompanying you to treatments?" "He's still at the house, sleeping in the guest room. He comes and goes at odd hours. Says it's work, but..." Sarah shrugged, too tired to finish the sentence. "Stress compromises immune function," Dr. Patel said after a moment. "And with your type of leukemia, your immune system is already under siege from both the disease and the treatment. Your emotional well-being isn't separate from your physical recovery." Sarah appreciated the doctor's matter-of-fact approach. No pity, just practical concern. "I understand, and I'm trying to manage it. I've spoken with an attorney, I'm making arrangements." Dr. Patel nodded approvingly. "Good. Taking control of what you can is important." She hesitated, then added, "And you have support, besides your husband?" "Marianne has been amazing. She's practically moved into our guest house for the duration of my treatment." Sarah smiled slightly, thinking of her friend's fierce loyalty over the past weeks. As if summoned by the mention of her name, Marianne Bennett appeared in the doorway, her tall frame and corona of curly red hair making her immediately recognizable. At 51, Marianne was a force of nature, a brilliant literary critic whose scathing reviews had made junior academics tremble, and whose fierce protectiveness of her friends was legendary in their department. "Just checking if you need anything," Marianne said, her Boston accent more pronounced when she was concerned. "I brought those crackers you liked yesterday." Dr. Patel stood, offering her stool to Marianne. "Perfect timing. I was just about to suggest Sarah have someone with her during these last 30 minutes. The new medication might make her dizzy." After the doctor left, Marianne settled beside Sarah, unpacking a small bag of plain crackers and a thermos of ginger tea. "Anything from himself today?" she asked, not bothering to hide her contempt for William. Sarah shook her head. "He texted that he has back-to-back surgeries. Won't be home until late." "Convenient," Marianne muttered. His surgeries have certainly multiplied since you found out about Rebecca. The name still caused a physical reaction in Sarah, a tightening in her chest, as if someone had suddenly reduced the oxygen in the room. Harrison called while you were parking the car, she said, changing the subject to her divorce attorney. The financial discovery is underway. William has until Friday to disclose all accounts. Marianne's expression darkened. Will he? Disclose everything, I mean. Sarah considered the question. William had always been meticulous, controlling. It was what made him an excellent surgeon. That same precision likely extended to covering his tracks. I don't know, but Harrison says there are ways to find hidden assets if we need to. The remaining treatment passed with Marianne reading aloud from the latest academic journal, a ritual they'd established years ago as colleagues and continued now as a distraction from the chemicals flowing into Sarah's veins. By the time the nurse removed the IV, Sarah was exhausted, her body heavy with fatigue. The drive home was silent. Sarah, too, nauseated to speak, Marianne respecting her need for quiet. When they arrived at the house, Sarah was surprised to see William's car in the driveway. "Want me to come in with you?" Marianne asked, her hand hovering over the ignition. Sarah shook her head. "I'll be fine. You should get back to campus for your afternoon seminar." She managed a weak smile. "Tell the graduate students I miss terrorizing them with surprise Faulkner analyses." Marianne squeezed her hand. "Call me if you need anything at all." Inside, the house was quiet, except for the sound of William's voice coming from his study. The door was partially open, and Sarah paused in the hallway, her body still unsteady from the treatment. "I know it's difficult," William was saying, his voice carrying the gentle patience he typically reserved for anxious patients. "But we need to be careful right now. Sarah's attorney is requesting financial records, and if we move too quickly, it could complicate things." A pause, then William again. "Of course I'm still committed to our plan, but these things take time, especially with her condition. The optics of leaving my wife while she's undergoing cancer treatment, it would destroy my reputation at the hospital." The words landed like physical blows. Optics, reputation, not morality or commitment or the 16 years they'd shared, just how it would look to his colleagues and patients if he abandoned his sick wife. "Rebecca, please try to understand," William continued, his voice dropping to a softer register. "Just a few more months. Once her treatment cycle is complete, we can—" He stopped abruptly. "Wait. What? Are you certain?" Another long pause. "That changes things. How far along? 9 weeks?" William's voice had shifted, a new tension evident. "No, of course I'm happy. Just surprised. We'll need to adjust our timeline, that's all." Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. 9 weeks pregnant. While she was losing her hair and struggling to keep food down, William and Rebecca had been creating new life. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her, her body failing, while her husband created a family with another woman. She must have made a sound because William's chair suddenly scraped against the floor. "I need to go," he said hurriedly into the phone. "I'll call you tonight." Sarah considered retreating to the kitchen, pretending she hadn't heard, but something in her refused to hide. She remained where she was, meeting William's eyes when he emerged from his study. "You're home early," he said, recovering quickly from his surprise. "How was the treatment?" "Illuminating," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "Congratulations are in order, it seems." William's face drained of color. "Sarah, 9 weeks," she continued, moving past him toward the kitchen. She needed water, needed to sit before her legs gave out. "That would be March? Right around when I started treatment. Excellent timing." William followed her, his surgeon's composure reasserting itself. "I was going to tell you once things settled with your health." Sarah laughed, a hollow sound that startled them both. "How considerate. Waiting until I was strong enough to hear that while I was fighting for my life, you were starting a new one with Rebecca." "It wasn't planned," William said, the words sounding rehearsed. "But now that it's happened, I need to take responsibility." "Responsibility," Sarah repeated, filling a glass with water from the refrigerator. Her hand shook slightly, spilling drops onto the counter. "Is that why you transferred $180,000 out of our joint account? Taking responsibility?" William's expression hardened. "You've been going through my financial records." "Our financial records," Sarah corrected him. "And yes, I have. Just as your girlfriend's pregnancy isn't the only surprise I've discovered recently." They stared at each other across the kitchen island. the same spot where 3 weeks earlier she'd first seen the cabin reservation that had unraveled her life. William looked older suddenly, the lines around his mouth deeper, his posture less commanding. "This isn't how I wanted this to happen," he said finally. "And how did you want it to happen?" Sarah asked. "A clean break after my funeral, perhaps? Or were you hoping I'd survive just long enough to sign divorce papers with minimal public relations damage to your precious career?" William flinched. "That's unfair." Unfair? Sarah felt the rage she'd been suppressing rise to the surface. "Unfair is discovering your husband has been planning his exit strategy while you're vomiting from chemotherapy. Unfair is learning he's diverted funds that might be needed for your medical care to set up his new life. Unfair is—" Her voice broke, and she gripped the counter to steady herself as another wave of nausea hit. William moved toward her, professional instinct overriding their personal conflict. "You should sit down. You're pale." "Don't," Sarah said, raising a hand to ward him off. "Don't pretend to care now." William stopped, his expression shifting between frustration and what might have been genuine concern. "Despite what you believe, I do care about your well-being, Sarah. I always have. Just not enough to honor your vows, or basic human decency." She looked at him directly. "When were you planning to ask for the divorce? After I finished treatment? Or were you hoping my prognosis would worsen and solve the problem for you?" The flash of guilt across William's face told her everything. "I think you should move out," Sarah said quietly. "Today." William straightened, his doctor's authority reasserting itself. "You're in no condition to be alone right now. The treatment side effects are my concern, not yours," Sarah interrupted. "Marianne has moved into the guest house. I'm not alone." "The guest house is my property too," William countered. "This whole estate is in both our names." "For now," Sarah agreed. "But my attorney assures me that abandoning your wife during cancer treatment while diverting marital assets to another woman doesn't play well in court, especially not in Massachusetts." They stared at each other in tense silence, the grandfather clock in the hallway marking time between them. "I'll need a few days to arrange things," William said finally. "You have until Friday," Sarah replied, the same deadline her attorney had given for financial disclosure. "After that, I change the locks." William's jaw tightened. "This doesn't have to be adversarial, Sarah. We can reach an amicable settlement that provides for your care and—" "My care," Sarah repeated incredulously. "I'm not one of your charity cases, William. I'm your wife, at least for now." "Rebecca is having my child," William said, his voice hardening. "That changes everything." "Yes, it does," Sarah agreed. "It ensures that when this divorce becomes public, and it will, everyone will know exactly what kind of man the esteemed Dr. Morgan truly is." William paled slightly. "You wouldn't." "I've spent 20 years analyzing how betrayal functions in literature," Sarah said, a strange calm settling over her. "Now I get to study it firsthand. Fascinating research opportunity, don't you think?" William stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. This wasn't the accommodating wife he'd expected, the woman who had built her life around supporting his career, who had agreed to remain childless because his work was too demanding for family life, who had organized charity galas to enhance his professional standing, even while maintaining her own academic career. "I never meant to hurt you," he said finally, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "And yet you did," Sarah replied. "Intentionally or not, the damage is done." She set down her water glass, suddenly too exhausted to continue the conversation. "I'm going to lie down. Please be gone when I wake up." She made her way upstairs to their bedroom, her bedroom now, each step requiring concentration. The nausea was intensifying, and her vision blurred slightly at the edges. Still, she refused to show weakness in front of William. Only when the door closed behind her did she allow herself to sink onto the bed, her body trembling with fatigue and emotion. Through the window, she could see her rose garden, the pride of their property, featured twice in Boston Home magazine. The May blooms were beginning to open, unaware that the hands that had tenderly pruned them for years might not be there to see them reach full glory. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling tears slide down her temples and into her hair. The revelation of Rebecca's pregnancy had done what even the cancer diagnosis couldn't. It had shattered any lingering hope that her life might someday return to what it had been. There would be no reconciliation, no possibility that William's affair had been a temporary madness. He was having a child, the child he had convinced Sarah they shouldn't have. He was building a new family while dismantling the one they'd created together. He was rewriting their history, casting her as an obligation to be managed rather than a partner to be cherished. As the medication pulled her toward uneasy sleep, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. She would survive this, both the cancer and the betrayal, and William would discover that the quiet, supportive wife he'd taken for granted had reserves of strength he'd never imagined. Outside, a sudden spring shower began to fall, the drops pattering against the window glass. In the garden below, the roses bent under the weight of the rain, but did not break, their stems flexible yet resilient, adapting to survive the storm. The knocking came at precisely 9 in the morning, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the quiet house. Sarah had been awake for hours, watching dawn break over her garden, unable to sleep through the bone-deep ache that was becoming her constant companion. June had arrived with unseasonable heat that seemed to intensify her symptoms. Night sweats, fatigue that made even crossing a room feel like running a marathon. William had moved out a week ago, taking only essential belongings and his car. The rest, he'd said, could be sorted later. The house felt both emptier and somehow less suffocating without his presence. Still, Sarah hadn't expected visitors, especially not at this hour. She wrapped her silk robe tighter around her thinning frame and made her way carefully down the stairs. Through the frosted glass panels of the front door, she could make out the silhouette of a man. Too short to be William, too formal in posture to be a friend. "Mrs. Morgan?" The man extended his hand when she opened the door. "Jeffrey Pearson from Pearson, Whitley and Associates. I represent Dr. Morgan in your dissolution proceedings." Sarah didn't take his offered hand. "My attorney is Richard Harrison. All communications should go through him." Pearson smiled thinly, undeterred. "I've already spoken with Mr. Harrison this morning. He suggested I speak with you directly about certain matters that have come to light." Something in his tone made Sarah step back, allowing him entry despite her misgivings. "What matters? Perhaps we should sit down." Pearson gestured toward the living room, moving with the confidence of someone used to taking control of uncomfortable situations. Sarah led him to the formal sitting area they'd rarely used, a showcase room designed more for William's colleagues than actual living. She perched on the edge of an armchair, declining to offer refreshments. Pearson set his leather briefcase on the coffee table and extracted a thick folder. "Mrs. Morgan, I'll be direct. There are irregularities in your husband's financial declarations that Mr. Harrison has identified. Dr. Morgan asked me to address these concerns personally." "Irregularities," Sarah repeated flatly. "Yes." Pearson adjusted his tie. "Italian silk," she noted absently, "probably costing more than a month of her cancer medications, specifically regarding certain accounts and investments that were not initially disclosed." Sarah felt a cold clarity settle over her. He tried to hide assets. Pearson's expression remained professional, but his slight hesitation confirmed her suspicion. "Dr. Morgan has now provided a complete accounting of all marital assets. The updated disclosure includes several offshore accounts and a property in Vermont registered under a corporate entity." "Vermont," Sarah murmured. "Let me guess, near Whispering Pines Resort." Pearson looked momentarily discomfited. "I'm not privy to the specific location. What matters is that Dr. Morgan is prepared to make a very generous settlement offer." He slid a document across the table. "Given your health situation, he feels this would best serve everyone's interests." Sarah didn't touch the papers. "My health situation being terminal cancer and his interests being a clean break to start his new family?" "Mrs. Morgan, please." Pearson's voice took on a patronizing tone that made her skin crawl. "Dr. Morgan has expressed sincere concern for your well-being. This settlement includes continued health coverage under his premium plan and a substantial monthly stipend that would allow you to maintain your current lifestyle." "How considerate," Sarah said, the words bitter on her tongue. "And what does William want in return for this generosity?" Pearson cleared his throat. "A clean division. No claims on future earnings, patents, or intellectual property developed by Dr. Morgan. And," he hesitated slightly, "discretion regarding the circumstances of your separation. He wants me to sign an NDA about his affair with a woman young enough to be his daughter while I was beginning chemotherapy." Sarah laughed, the sound hollow in the formal room. "The agreement simply includes a mutual non-disparagement clause," Pearson clarified, his discomfort growing more evident. "Both parties would agree not to speak negatively about the other. particularly in professional contexts. Sarah finally reached for the document, scanning its dense legal text. The financial terms were indeed generous on the surface. The house, a lump sum of $1.2 million, continued health insurance. But buried in the clauses were poison pills. She would have to waive rights to William's pension, to any patents or procedures he developed, several of which she knew had been conceptualized during their marriage, with her serving as a sounding board, and to any claims on his future earnings which would likely dwarf the settlement amount. "William must be desperate if he sent you here personally," Sarah observed, setting the papers aside. "What's he afraid I'll discover next?" Pearson's professional mask slipped slightly. "Mrs. Morgan, I advise you to consider this offer carefully. Litigation is stressful and expensive, particularly for someone in your condition." "My condition," Sarah repeated slowly. "You keep referring to that. Has William shared my prognosis with you?" Pearson shifted uncomfortably. "He mentioned the treatment is challenging. Did he also mention that my type of leukemia has a 40% 5-year survival rate with aggressive treatment? Treatment that costs approximately $475,000 per year." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Did he tell you that he's been planning this exit for at least 8 months, transferring assets, preparing for a clean break, while I was still unaware of either my illness or his betrayal?" Pearson's expression remained carefully neutral, but his eyes betrayed his surprise. "Mrs. Morgan, I understand this is emotionally difficult. This isn't about emotions, Mr. Pearson. This is about justice." Sarah stood, despite the fatigue weighing down her limbs. "Please tell William that any communication should go through my attorney, as previously established, and that I look forward to discovery proceedings." After showing the clearly unsettled attorney out, Sarah leaned against the closed door, her heart racing unnaturally fast, a side effect of her medication that seemed to intensify with stress. She needed to call Harrison immediately, but first, she needed to sit before her legs gave out. As she made her way to the kitchen, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Sarah Morgan," she answered, sinking gratefully into a chair. "Mrs. Morgan, this is Elaine Winters from Boston Memorial Hospital." The woman's voice was crisp, professional. "I'm Dr. Carlton's administrative assistant in the ethics department." Sarah frowned. She didn't know anyone in the hospital's ethics department. "How can I help you, Ms. Winters?" "Actually, I believe I can help you." The woman's tone shifted, becoming less formal. "I'm taking a significant professional risk by making this call, but I feel you should know that your husband has initiated proceedings to have you removed from his hospital-provided health insurance plan, effective next month." Sarah felt the room tilt slightly. "That can't be right. Our divorce isn't final, and even the settlement offer includes continued coverage." "I'm afraid the paperwork is on my desk," Elaine replied. "Doctor, Morgan has claimed a change in marital status and requested expedited processing. But that's..." Sarah struggled to find words strong enough. "That's despicable and possibly illegal. Hence my call to the ethics department," Elaine said, with a hint of dry humor. "Mrs. Morgan, I've worked at Boston Memorial for 27 years. I've seen plenty of doctors behave badly, but this..." She paused. "Let's just say there are those of us who believe in accountability." "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked, suspicious despite her gratitude. "You could lose your job." "Because 15 years ago, my sister was diagnosed with the same type of leukemia you're fighting. Her husband left her 3 months later. She lost her insurance, couldn't afford the full treatment protocol, and died 9 months after diagnosis." Elaine's voice hardened. "I'm not letting that happen to another woman if I can help it." Sarah closed her eyes, processing this unexpected alliance. "What can I do?" "Document everything, and I do mean everything. Dates of when he left, when he cut off support, any conversations about your medical care." Elaine paused, then added more quietly, "And I may be able to provide certain internal documentation that could prove illuminating." After arranging a secure email for future communication, Sarah ended the call and immediately dialed Harrison. The attorney answered on the first ring. "I was just about to call you," he said, skipping greetings. "Pearson reached out. Apparently their meeting didn't go as planned." Sarah managed a small smile despite everything. "No, it didn't. And I just received some interesting information about William's attempts to remove me from his health insurance while treatment is ongoing." Harrison's sharp intake of breath was audible. "That changes things significantly. Judges look very unfavorably on attempts to cut off medical support, especially in cases involving serious illness. I need to know what else he's hiding, Sarah said, resolve hardening her voice. I trusted him completely for 16 years. I need to know exactly how misplaced that trust was. We'll file for emergency discovery, Harrison assured her, and I know an excellent forensic accountant who specializes in high net worth divorces. If there's anything else hidden, she'll find it. After ending the call, Sarah sat motionless at the kitchen table, looking out at her garden through the window. The June sun beat down mercilessly on her roses, which drooped slightly in the unusual heat. She would need to water them this evening, assuming she had the strength to manage the heavy hose. The doorbell rang again, interrupting her thoughts. Sarah considered ignoring it, too exhausted for another confrontation, but something urged her to answer. Marianne stood on the porch, holding a canvas bag that Sarah recognized from their farmers' market trips. I brought soup, she announced without preamble, and information. 10 minutes later, they sat at the kitchen island, a container of homemade chicken soup steaming between them. Sarah had managed only a few spoonfuls, but even that small amount had helped steady her. William was at the faculty mixer last night, Marianne said, her expression carefully neutral. With Rebecca, Sarah's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. At our university, in my department's event. Marianne nodded grimly. Dean Matthews asked about you. William said you were resting comfortably at home and that he'd pass along everyone's good wishes. The casual hypocrisy of it, maintaining his image as the devoted husband while actively working to undermine her healthcare, sent a wave of cold fury through Sarah. There's more, Marianne continued hesitantly. Rebecca is showing now. It's definitely not a 9-week pregnancy. She looks closer to 5 months. Sarah set down her spoon, the implications crystallizing. He's been lying about the timing. It appears so. Marianne reached across the table, covering Sarah's cold hand with her warm one. Sarah, I know this is the last thing you need right now, but I thought you should hear it from me rather than through department gossip. 5 months would mean, Sarah calculated quickly, January, before my diagnosis. He knew she was pregnant when I was diagnosed in February. And he still played the devoted husband through your first treatments, Marianne finished, while actively planning his exit. The full weight of William's deception pressed down on Sarah like a physical force. Not just an affair that had resulted in an unexpected pregnancy, but a calculated long-term plan to replace her with a younger model, to start the family he'd convinced her they didn't want. And when her diagnosis had complicated his timeline, he'd simply adjusted, playing both sides until he could extract himself with minimal damage to his reputation. I need to lie down, Sarah said suddenly, the room spinning around her. I don't feel... She didn't finish the sentence. Darkness closed in from the edges of her vision, and the last thing she heard was Marianne's alarmed voice calling her name. Sarah woke to the steady beep of hospital monitors and the familiar antiseptic smell of a medical room. Dr. Patel stood at the foot of her bed, reviewing a chart with a frown that deepened the lines between her brows. Welcome back, the doctor said, noticing Sarah's open eyes. You gave your friend quite a scare. Sarah tried to speak, found her throat too dry, and accepted the water Dr. Patel offered. What happened? Your blood pressure dropped dangerously low. Combined with your already compromised immune system and the dehydration from your treatment side effects, Dr. Patel set down the chart. Sarah, I'm concerned about your ability to manage at home right now. I'm fine, Sarah insisted automatically. Just tired. You're not fine, Dr. Patel countered firmly. Your latest blood work shows your white cell count is critically low. We need to adjust your treatment protocol and possibly consider a short hospital stay to stabilize your condition. The thought of being confined to a hospital bed, dependent and vulnerable, sent a wave of panic through Sarah. I can't. My divorce. There are meetings, documents I need to review. Dr. Patel's expression softened slightly. Your health has to come first, Sarah. Everything else is secondary right now. Before Sarah could argue further, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, the sound of hurried footsteps. Then William appeared in the doorway, still wearing surgical scrubs, his expression a perfect mask of husbandly concern. I came as soon as I heard, he said, moving to Sarah's bedside with the confidence of someone who belonged there. What happened? Dr. Patel glanced between them, clearly sensing the tension. I'll give you a moment, she said diplomatically, stepping out of the room, As soon as the door closed, William's concerned expression hardened into something more calculating. "This is exactly what I've been worried about," he said, lowering his voice. "You can't manage on your own in your condition. This proves my point." Sarah stared at him, seeing through his performance with new clarity. "Why are you here, William? Really, despite what you believe, I do care about your well-being." His voice carried the practiced sincerity he used with patients' families. "And I'm still your medical proxy. The hospital contacted me automatically." The realization sent a chill through Sarah. Of course, they'd never updated her medical directives after the separation. William still had legal authority to make medical decisions if she became incapacitated. "That needs to change," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Immediately." William sighed as if dealing with a difficult patient. "Sarah, be reasonable. You need someone with medical knowledge making decisions about your care, especially now when you're clearly struggling." "I'll appoint Marianne," Sarah countered. "Or Dr. Patel herself. Anyone but you." William's expression tightened. "This is exactly the kind of emotional reaction that concerns me. You're making decisions based on anger rather than what's best for your health." "Don't you dare," Sarah said, her voice low but intense. "Don't you dare stand there and pretend to care about my well-being when you've been actively trying to remove me from your health insurance, when you've hidden assets that could pay for my treatment, when you've been planning your exit since before my diagnosis." William paled slightly. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter," Sarah interrupted. "What matters is that I finally see you clearly, William. The man I married never existed. He was just a performance. The devoted husband, the ethical doctor, the honest partner, it was all a lie." William's face hardened. "You're not thinking clearly. The medication, the stress." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years," Sarah said. "Now please leave before I call security and create exactly the kind of public scene you've been trying so desperately to avoid." After a moment of tense silence, William turned to go, but paused at the door. "The settlement offer still stands," he said stiffly, "for now. But my patience isn't unlimited, Sarah." "Neither is mine," she replied. "And unlike you, I have nothing left to lose." When he'd gone, Sarah sank back against the pillows, exhaustion washing over her. The confrontation had drained what little energy she had, but it had also crystallized something in her mind. As long as William remained her medical proxy, as long as she was vulnerable to his manipulation, she would never be truly free of him. Despite her fatigue, she reached for the call button. When a nurse appeared, Sarah asked for Dr. Patel to return immediately. "I need to change my advance directive," she told the doctor when she arrived, "and I need your advice on something else." "Doctor." Patel listened carefully as Sarah explained her situation. The divorce, William's attempts to control her care and finances, her fear that decisions about her treatment might be influenced by factors other than her best medical interest. "Can you recommend a patient advocate?" Sarah asked when she'd finished. "Someone who understands both the medical and legal aspects of my situation?" Dr. Patel considered for a moment. "Actually, I can do better than that. There's a program at Harvard Law School, a clinic specializing in medical law and patient rights. They could assign a team to your case, a medical ethicist, a law student supervised by a practicing attorney, and a patient advocate." "That sounds perfect," Sarah said. "But will they take my case? I'm not exactly disadvantaged. I have resources, an attorney." "Your case is exactly the kind they look for," Dr. Patel assured her. "Complex ethical issues, potential medical discrimination, a vulnerable patient facing institutional challenges. Plus," she added with a small smile, "I happen to volunteer with them. I can make a call." As Dr. Patel left to arrange the consultation, Sarah gazed out the hospital window at the Boston skyline bathed in late afternoon light. For the first time since her diagnosis, since discovering William's betrayal, she felt something like hope stirring inside her. Not just for survival, but for justice. Hours later, after completing new advance directives naming Marianne as her medical proxy, Sarah was preparing to sign discharge papers against medical advice when her phone chimed with an email notification. The sender was Elaine Winters, the ethics department assistant who had reached out earlier. The message contained no text, just an attachment labeled Morgan Insurance Termination.pdf and a second file named Correspondence CMO Ethics.pdf. With shaking fingers, Sarah opened the first document. It was indeed the form William had submitted to terminate her insurance coverage, dated 3 days after he'd moved out of their home. But what caught her attention was the reason he'd cited: irreconcilable differences resulting in permanent separation with divorce pending. The second document was more damning. An email exchange between William and the hospital's chief medical officer, dated 2 weeks earlier. "Bill, regarding your situation at home, I can expedite the insurance change on compassionate grounds given the prognosis. No need for this to get tangled in red tape. Just need your signature on the standard forms." Mark Williams' response had been brief. "Appreciate the discretion, Mark. The less administrative involvement, the better. Standard forms are fine if they achieve the same result." Sarah stared at the screen, the words burning into her consciousness. On compassionate grounds given the prognosis. William had discussed her condition, perhaps even exaggerated its severity, to facilitate cutting off her insurance more quickly. In that moment, something fundamental shifted within Sarah Morgan. The hurt, the betrayal, the fear, they didn't disappear, but they crystallized into something harder, something that could cut glass. Resolve. She set down the phone and signed the discharge papers with a steady hand. Then she called Harrison. "I want to pursue every legal option," she said when he answered. "I want a forensic audit of every account, every transaction William has made in the past 2 years. I want depositions from hospital staff about his attempts to terminate my insurance. I want everything." "Sarah," Harrison said carefully, "that approach will be expensive, time-consuming, and incredibly stressful. In your condition—" "My condition is precisely why I need to do this," Sarah interrupted. "William is counting on me being too sick, too tired, too afraid to fight. He's using my illness as a weapon against me." She paused, then added with quiet determination, "I won't let him win. Not just for myself, but for every patient whose partner abandoned them when they needed support most." After a moment's silence, Harrison responded with simple clarity, "Then we'll fight. And Sarah, we'll win." As the evening nurse wheeled her toward the hospital exit where Marianne waited, Sarah felt an unfamiliar sensation beneath her exhaustion, a quiet, burning resolve. William had underestimated her, seeing only the accommodating wife, the deteriorating patient. He had forgotten, or perhaps never truly known, the scholar who had built her academic reputation by analyzing the complex patterns of betrayal in American literature. Now she would apply that analytical mind to her own life, to William's deceptions, to the systems that enabled powerful men to discard sick wives without consequences. She would become not just a cancer patient fighting for survival, but a woman determined to reshape the narrative that William had tried to write for her. Outside, twilight had fallen over Boston. The city lights sparkled against the darkening sky, a constellation of human persistence against the encroaching night. Sarah looked up at them and made a silent promise to herself. This would not be her ending. Not yet. Not like this. July arrived with a smothering heat wave that left the city shimmering beneath a haze of humidity. In Sarah's garden, the summer roses struggled against the oppressive warmth, their edges beginning to brown despite her careful evening watering. Inside the cool sanctuary of her study, Sarah sat at her antique writing desk, fingers poised over her laptop keyboard. "Begin at the beginning," Marianne had advised when Sarah first mentioned documenting her experience. "Write it all down, not just for the legal case, but for yourself." The blank document had intimidated her at first. How to capture the systematic dismantling of a 16-year marriage. How to articulate the peculiar pain of being abandoned during illness by the one person who had vowed to stand by her in sickness and in health. But once she started typing, the words flowed with surprising ease. She titled the document simply, "When He Left, A Medical Wife's Journey Through Abandonment, Cancer and Reclamation." Sarah had been working on the manuscript for 3 weeks now, her writing sessions scheduled between treatment appointments and meetings with Harrison and the Harvard Law Clinic team. The process was unexpectedly therapeutic. Transforming her personal trauma into a coherent narrative gave her a sense of control that her illness had stripped away. "The irony wasn't lost on me," she typed, "that as a professor who had spent decades analyzing betrayal in literature, I had failed to recognize it in my own home. The clues had been there, the late nights, the guarded phone, the emotional distance. But we see what we expect to see, and I had expected fidelity." A soft knock at the study door interrupted her flow. Marianne stood in the doorway, holding a glass of the protein shake Dr. Patel had prescribed. "Time for a break," she announced, setting the glass on a coaster beside Sarah's laptop. "And Dr. Patel's office called. Your blood work results are in." Sarah saved her document and took a sip of the shake, grimacing slightly at the chalky taste. "Did they say anything else?" Marianne's face broke into a rare, wide smile. "Your counts are up. All of them. White cells, red cells, platelets. Everything is trending in the right direction." For a moment, Sarah couldn't speak. After months of decline, of bracing for increasingly grim news, this small victory felt monumental. "Really? Really?" Marianne confirmed, perching on the edge of the desk. "Dr. Patel wants to see you tomorrow to discuss adjusting your treatment plan, but she said, and I quote, 'This is exactly the response we've been hoping for.'" The rush of emotion caught Sarah by surprise. Not just relief, but a fierce, unexpected joy. She might survive this. Not just the divorce, not just William's betrayal, but the cancer itself. "We should celebrate," Marianne declared. "Nothing wild, just dinner on the terrace. I'll invite Elena from the clinic team. She's been asking how you're doing." Elena Rodriguez had been an unexpected ally in Sarah's fight. As the senior law student assigned to her case through the Harvard Medical Law Clinic, Elena brought both legal acumen and personal passion to Sarah's situation. Her own mother had faced similar abandonment during breast cancer treatment years earlier, giving Elena a unique perspective on the intersection of medical vulnerability and marital betrayal. "That sounds perfect," Sarah agreed, realizing she actually had an appetite for the first time in weeks. Later that evening, the three women sat on Sarah's terrace overlooking the rose garden. The day's heat had finally broken, replaced by a gentle breeze carrying the scent of summer blooms. Sarah had managed a small portion of the grilled salmon Marianne had prepared and now sipped ginger tea, while Elena spread documents across the patio table. "The forensic accountant's preliminary report," Elena explained, pointing to a highlighted section. "Harrison asked me to review it with you before your meeting tomorrow." Sarah scanned the pages, her literature professor's eye quickly picking out the narrative beneath the financial jargon. "He's been planning this for more than a year," she said quietly, noting the dates of the first account transfers. "At least 18 months, Eleanor confirmed. "The first significant movement of funds coincides with his attendance at a medical conference in Chicago. January last year," Sarah finished, "when he said he was presenting a paper on minimally invasive valve replacements." "He was presenting something, all right," Marianne muttered. "Just not a paper," Elena continued, professional despite her obvious disgust with William's actions. "He established a shell corporation in Nevada then, listing himself as sole proprietor. Since then, he's transferred approximately $1.4 million through various accounts, ultimately consolidating most assets in an offshore trust." Sarah nodded, the academic part of her mind appreciating the meticulous planning, even as the betrayed wife in her recoiled. "And Rebecca, is she connected to any of this financially?" "Not directly," Elena replied, flipping to another document. "But we've discovered something interesting. She's not exactly who she appears to be either." Sarah leaned forward, wincing slightly at the pull of sore muscles. "What do you mean?" "Rebecca Mitchell isn't just a pharmaceutical rep who happened to meet Dr. Morgan at a conference." Eleanor handed over a printed LinkedIn profile. "She previously worked as a financial analyst, specializing in medical investment portfolios. She only switched to pharmaceutical sales 3 years ago, after completing a specialized training in medical device marketing." The implications settled over Sarah like a cold fog. "She targeted him." "We can't prove intent," Eleanor cautioned, ever the careful legal mind. "But the timeline suggests their meeting wasn't as coincidental as Dr. Morgan has implied, and there's more." She hesitated, glancing at Marianne as if seeking permission to continue. "Tell her," Marianne said firmly. "She needs to know everything." Eleanor nodded. "Rebecca has been married before, twice. Both times to successful doctors, both marriages lasting less than 5 years, both ending with substantial settlements in her favor." Sarah absorbed this information with surprising calmness. Rather than adding to her pain, each new revelation about William and Rebecca seemed to distance her further from the emotional devastation of the initial betrayal. The puzzle was coming together, forming a picture not of great romance, but of calculated opportunism. "So she's done this before," Sarah said, more statement than question. "It appears so," Elena confirmed. "We're still gathering information, but the pattern is suggestive." Sarah sipped her tea, watching the fireflies begin to emerge in the garden below. The knowledge should have hurt, that William had been not just unfaithful, but utterly foolish, falling for what appeared to be a practiced scheme. Instead, she felt an odd sense of clarity, even liberation. "This changes our approach," she said finally. "Harrison has been building a case based on abandonment during medical crisis, which is still valid. But this adds another dimension." Eleanor nodded, impressed by Sarah's strategic thinking despite her illness. "Exactly. If we can demonstrate that Dr. Morgan was essentially manipulated into transferring marital assets as part of a pattern of behavior by Ms. Mitchell, then it's not just about William being a terrible husband," Sarah continued, "but about protecting marital assets from a predatory third party." She smiled slightly at Elena's surprised expression. "I've been teaching the portrait of a lady for 20 years, Elena. I recognize an Isabel Archer situation when I see one. The literary reference to Henry James's heroine who is manipulated for her fortune broke the tension, and all three women laughed. For the first time in months, Sarah felt something like her old self emerging from beneath the layers of illness and betrayal. Their planning session was interrupted by the chime of Sarah's phone. The screen displayed a name she hadn't expected to see: Benjamin Winters, William's longtime colleague and friend. "I should take this," she said, excusing herself to step into the kitchen. "Sarah," Benjamin's deep voice carried a note of discomfort. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," she replied, keeping her tone neutral. Benjamin had been a frequent dinner guest in their home over the years, but since the separation, he had maintained a diplomatic distance from both parties. "What can I do for you, Benjamin?" He hesitated, clearing his throat. "I heard about your improved test results. I wanted to say I'm glad." Sarah frowned slightly, processing the implication. "William told you about my medical status?" The violation of privacy stung, even after everything else. No, Benjamin quickly clarified. "I've been serving on the hospital's ethics committee review of his situation. Your medical information came up in that context." Sarah gripped the counter, steadying herself. "There's an ethics committee review of William?" Benjamin sighed heavily. "There is now. After certain information came to light regarding his attempts to terminate your insurance while actively discussing your case with colleagues, well, it raised serious concerns. The revelation that William's professional reputation, the thing he valued above almost everything, might be in jeopardy, sent a complicated wave of emotions through Sarah. Not triumph exactly, but a sense that perhaps justice existed after all. "I see," she said carefully. "And you're calling to inform me of this officially?" "Unofficially," Benjamin corrected. "The formal review is still pending, but Sarah," his voice dropped slightly, "things aren't going well for him. The pregnancy, the timing of everything. It's raised eyebrows even among those who've always supported him. And Rebecca isn't exactly discreet." "Meaning?" "Meaning she's been making claims about her future role at the hospital, about research grants she'll help secure once she and William are married. It's causing tension within the department." Sarah absorbed this information silently, mentally adding it to the growing picture of Rebecca Mitchell. Ambitious, calculating, and apparently not as patient as William might have hoped. "Why are you telling me this, Benjamin?" she asked finally. The pause before his answer spoke volumes. "Because whatever happened between you and William, you deserve to know that some of us recognize the injustice of the situation. And because," another hesitation, "because I was there, Sarah. I was at the conferences, the department retreats. I saw it happening and said nothing. Told myself it wasn't my business. I've regretted that silence." After ending the call with a promise to keep any further developments confidential, Sarah returned to the terrace, her mind racing with new possibilities. "Everything okay?" Marianne asked, noting her thoughtful expression. "Better than okay," Sarah replied, resuming her seat. "It seems William's carefully constructed new life isn't as stable as he'd planned." As she relayed Benjamin's information, Sarah felt a strategy forming, not one born of revenge or bitterness, but of a clear-eyed assessment of her position and the leverage it might provide. For the first time since her diagnosis, since William's betrayal, she felt truly powerful. "We need to accelerate the timeline," she told Eleanor, "not for the divorce itself, but for securing my medical coverage and a portion of the assets. William is facing professional scrutiny now, which makes this the optimal moment to negotiate." Eleanor nodded, already making notes. "A strategic settlement rather than a protracted battle. We could approach it as saving him from further professional embarrassment. Exactly, Sarah agreed. William values his reputation above everything. If we position this correctly, he might agree to terms that secure my future just to prevent further damage to his image. As they refined the approach, Sarah felt a strange sense of gratitude for her academic training, the ability to analyze situations dispassionately, to identify narrative patterns, to understand motivations and leverage points. What William had dismissed as merely teaching books had equipped her with the very tools she needed to counteract his betrayal. Later that night, after Marianne and Elena had left, Sarah returned to her manuscript. The words flowed differently now, infused with a new perspective. She was no longer just documenting trauma for therapeutic purposes. She was reclaiming her narrative, transforming from victim to strategist. "The greatest disservice we do to ourselves," she wrote, "is believing that our value is determined by those who fail to see it. For 16 years, I had shaped myself to fit William's vision of the perfect surgeon's wife, supportive, undemanding, content to reflect his light rather than generate my own. My illness had revealed the fragility of that arrangement, but it also offered an unexpected gift, the chance to rediscover my own worth independent of his validation." The following morning brought another surprise. As Sarah prepared for her appointment with Dr. Patel, a delivery arrived, a thick legal envelope requiring her signature. Inside was a formal notice that William had withdrawn his request to terminate her health insurance coverage, with a brief personal note on his professional stationery. "I never intended to compromise your care. The insurance will remain in place regardless of our personal situation." Sarah showed the document to Marianne, who had arrived to drive her to the hospital. "What do you make of this?" Marianne scanned the paperwork, her expression skeptical. "Damage control. Benjamin must have warned him about the ethics review." "Probably," Sarah agreed, "but it's still a win for us." At the hospital, Dr. Patel confirmed what the phone call had suggested. Sarah's body was responding to the treatment, her cancer cells retreating, her blood counts improving across all metrics. "It's not remission yet," the doctor cautioned, "but it's a very positive trend. If this continues, we can discuss reducing the intensity of your treatment in another month or so." Sarah absorbed this news with quiet joy. "And my prognosis?" Dr. Patel smiled, a genuine, hopeful expression rarely seen in oncology offices. "Let's just say I'm significantly more optimistic than I was 3 months ago. Your body is fighting, Sarah, and winning." The metaphor wasn't lost on her. Just as her cells were battling back against the cancer that had threatened to consume them, Sarah herself was reclaiming territory William had tried to take: her financial security, her medical care, her sense of self-worth. That afternoon, seated in Harrison's office with Elena beside her, Sarah outlined her proposed strategy for negotiation with William. "I don't want a scorched earth approach," she explained. "I want a clean, rapid settlement that secures my medical care, a fair portion of our assets, and complete independence going forward." Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her with newfound respect. "Not interested in making him pay for what he's done." "Oh, he'll pay," Sarah replied calmly, "but not in the way he expects. I'm not interested in prolonging my connection to William any longer than necessary. What I want is freedom, financial, emotional, and physical freedom to rebuild my life on my terms." As Harrison began drafting the settlement proposal, Sarah gazed out his office window at the Boston skyline. Somewhere in that sprawl of buildings, William was likely in surgery, his skilled hands saving lives even as his personal ethics failed those closest to him. Rebecca was perhaps shopping for maternity clothes, planning her ascent as the next Mrs. Morgan, unaware that her pattern had been recognized, and here sat Sarah, thinner, weaker physically than she had been a year ago, but stronger in ways that mattered more. The woman William had left behind in February wasn't the woman sitting in this office in July. Cancer and betrayal had stripped away pretense, burned through accommodation and compromise, revealing a core of resilience she hadn't known she possessed. As she left the office, Sarah's phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. It contained only a photo: William and Rebecca at what appeared to be a doctor's appointment, his expression tense, hers tearful. A moment later, a message followed. "Thought you should know, tests showed chromosomal abnormalities. They're facing difficult decisions. B." Sarah stared at the screen, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Despite everything, a part of her ached for William, for the child that might never be, for the pain that lay ahead for both him and Rebecca. Another part recognized the karmic symmetry. William facing medical uncertainty just as he had abandoned her to face hers alone. She chose not to respond to Benjamin's message. Whatever happened with William and Rebecca's pregnancy was their journey now, separate from hers. Instead, she texted Elena, ready to move forward with the settlement proposal. Time to close this chapter. That evening, as the summer sunset painted her garden in shades of gold and amber, Sarah walked slowly among her roses. Many had weathered the heat wave, displaying remarkable resilience. Others had withered, unable to adapt to the harsh conditions. She pruned the dead heads carefully, making room for new growth, just as she was pruning the dead wood from her own life. A particularly beautiful white rose caught her attention, one she had planted the year before, its name a romantic gesture at the time, everlasting love. Sarah had nearly dug it up after discovering William's betrayal, unable to bear the irony. Now she simply appreciated its beauty for what it was, temporary, imperfect, but no less valuable for its impermanence. As she touched its petals gently, Sarah realized that was perhaps the most important lesson of the past months. Nothing was everlasting, not marriage vows, not health, not certainty, but within that impermanence lay freedom. If nothing lasted forever, then nothing was truly lost forever either, including herself. She returned to her study as darkness fell, opening her manuscript with renewed purpose. The words she typed formed not just a record of what had happened, but a declaration of what would come next. I am more than what was taken from me. I am more than what remains. I am the space between loss and discovery, between ending and beginning. And that space, I now understand, is where true living happens. August in Boston brought suffocating humidity that settled over the city like a wool blanket. Inside the air-conditioned courthouse, Sarah sat perfectly still, her back straight despite the fatigue that lurked beneath her carefully applied makeup. The weight loss from her treatment was evident in the way her charcoal grey dress hung from her shoulders, but she had chosen it deliberately, professional yet undeniably the garment of someone facing health challenges. Across the polished conference table, William avoided her gaze. In the 6 weeks since she'd last seen him, he had aged visibly. New lines etched the corners of his eyes, and his immaculate silver hair seemed duller somehow. Beside him, Rebecca sat unnaturally still, her pregnancy now unmistakable beneath her expensive navy maternity dress. Sarah noticed her eyes were slightly puffy, as if she'd been crying recently. "Before we begin," Judge Marion Levesque said, glancing between the parties, "I want to clarify that this settlement conference is off the record. We're here to determine if litigation can be avoided through mutually acceptable terms." Her sharp eyes settled on William. "Dr. Morgan, your counsel has indicated you wish to speak directly to Mrs. Morgan before we proceed with formal negotiations." William cleared his throat, glancing briefly at Jeffrey Pearson beside him. "Yes, Your Honor. If possible." Judge Levesque looked to Sarah. "Mrs. Morgan, are you comfortable with a brief private conversation before we continue?" Sarah met William's eyes for the first time. Whatever he wanted to say, she could handle it. "That's acceptable, Your Honor." Minutes later, they stood in a small anteroom, the first time they'd been alone together since the hospital confrontation months earlier. William paced nervously, a gesture so uncharacteristic that it momentarily disoriented Sarah. The confident surgeon had always been economical in his movements, precise and deliberate. "You look better," he said finally, stopping near the window. "Your color is improved." "The new treatment protocol is working," Sarah replied neutrally. "My prognosis has been upgraded." William nodded, genuine relief briefly crossing his features. "I'm glad, truly." "What did you want to discuss, William? Judge Levesque is waiting." He turned to face her directly. "I want to settle this, Sarah, quickly and privately. The terms your attorney sent are acceptable." Sarah's carefully maintained composure nearly slipped. Harrison had crafted an aggressive proposal, significantly more favorable to her than they'd expected William to accept, without protracted negotiation. It included continued premium health coverage for life, full ownership of their home, a substantial lump sum payment, and ongoing support that acknowledged her career had been shaped around William's more demanding schedule. "Why the sudden cooperation?" she asked, studying his face. "Last I heard you were planning to contest nearly every point." William glanced toward the door as if checking they were truly alone. Things have changed. The ethics committee investigation has escalated. Benjamin probably told you. He mentioned it, Sarah acknowledged. What he may not have mentioned is that the board is now reviewing all my cases from the past 2 years. William's voice dropped lower. And there are complications with the pregnancy. Sarah maintained her neutral expression, despite the spike of sympathy that surprised her. I'm sorry to hear that. The prognosis isn't good, William continued, running a hand through his hair, another uncharacteristic gesture. The baby has a rare chromosomal disorder, one that will require specialized care throughout his life, if he survives to term. Sarah processed this information silently. The cosmic irony wasn't lost on her, William abandoning her during her health crisis only to face one with his unborn child. I need this divorce settled, Sarah, William said, an edge of desperation entering his voice, quietly and quickly. The publicity of a contested divorce, especially with the ethics investigation ongoing, I can't fight battles on every front. So this is about damage control, Sarah observed, unsurprised. It's about survival, William countered. Professional and personal. Rebecca is... He hesitated. She's not handling the diagnosis well. She expected a perfect new beginning, not a lifetime of medical challenges. Something in his tone made Sarah look more closely at him. Is she threatening to leave? William's bitter laugh confirmed her suspicion. Not in so many words, but she's made it clear this isn't what she signed up for. The devoted mother-to-be act is slipping now that reality has set in. Despite everything, Sarah felt a flicker of compassion for William. He looked lost, a man who had systematically destroyed his stable life for a fantasy that was now crumbling before it had even fully formed. I'll agree to the accelerated settlement, she said after a moment, but I want one addition to the terms. William tensed visibly. What addition? A formal letter from you to the hospital ethics committee, confirming that any actions regarding my insurance coverage were taken without my knowledge or consent, and acknowledging that such actions were inappropriate given our marital status at the time. William's expression darkened. That could be professional suicide, Sarah. Perhaps, she agreed calmly, or perhaps it demonstrates accountability and contrition, which might help your case with the board. Either way, it's my condition for accepting a quick, quiet settlement. He studied her face, perhaps searching for signs of vindictiveness or triumph. Finding none, he finally nodded. I'll have Pearson draft something for review. Back in the conference room, the negotiation proceeded with unexpected smoothness. Judge Levesque seemed mildly surprised at the lack of contention, but efficiently guided them through the necessary details. Throughout the process, Sarah noticed Rebecca's growing discomfort, shifting in her seat, checking her phone repeatedly, her expression alternating between boredom and irritation. As they reached the final points, a courthouse aide entered quietly and handed a note to Harrison, who read it with raised eyebrows before passing it to Sarah. Is something wrong? Judge Levesque asked, noting the interruption. Sarah glanced at the note, then at William. No, Your Honor, but I believe Dr. Morgan may need to address an urgent situation. There are representatives from the hospital board waiting outside. William paled visibly. Here? Now? Apparently there's been an emergency board meeting regarding the ethics investigation, Harrison elaborated, his tone carefully professional despite the bombshell he was delivering. They've requested Dr. Morgan's immediate presence once our proceedings conclude. Rebecca's head snapped up, her attention finally fully engaged. What ethics investigation? She demanded, looking at William. You said that was handled. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Judge Levesque cleared her throat. Perhaps we should complete the settlement approval without further delay. The remaining process passed in a blur of signatures and formal statements. Sarah maintained her composure throughout, even as she observed the silent tension building between William and Rebecca. Whatever facade of unity they'd presented was rapidly disintegrating under stress. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Benjamin Winters appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. Bill, he said, nodding formally to William, the committee is waiting in conference room B. William turned to Rebecca. Take the car. I'll call you when this is done. Like hell I will, Rebecca replied, her carefully cultivated image of supportive partner completely abandoned. I want to know exactly what's happening. This is a confidential hospital matter, Benjamin interjected smoothly. Only staff with direct involvement are permitted to attend. As William and Rebecca moved toward the door, locked in tense conversation, Benjamin approached Sarah. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "Better than expected," she replied honestly. "The settlement is fair, better than fair, actually." Benjamin glanced toward William's retreating figure. "He didn't tell you why the board called an emergency session, did he?" Sarah shook her head. "Someone leaked documents showing he discussed terminating your insurance with hospital administrators, while specifically referencing your diagnosis and prognosis, a clear high-pay violation." Benjamin lowered his voice further. "The board received copies of emails where he essentially suggested your condition was terminal to expedite the process." Sarah absorbed this revelation with surprising calmness. "Do you know who leaked the documents?" Benjamin's expression remained carefully neutral. "Officially, no. Unofficially, the digital signatures trace back to the Ethics Department administrative system." Sarah thought of Elaine Winters, the assistant who had first alerted her to William's insurance maneuvers, whose sister had died after losing coverage during cancer treatment. "I see. There's more," Benjamin continued. "The pharmaceutical company Rebecca works for has launched an internal investigation into her relationship with William. Apparently, there are concerns about preferential contracting for their products at the hospital since their relationship began." The full picture suddenly crystallized for Sarah. William wasn't just facing professional embarrassment, but potentially career-ending ethics violations that could even involve legal consequences. No wonder he had accepted her settlement terms without fight. As Benjamin excused himself to join the board meeting, Sarah stood alone in the now empty conference room. Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over Boston, promising relief from the oppressive August heat. She felt strangely detached from the gathering storm in William's professional life, neither vindicated nor sympathetic, simply observant. Harrison returned, tucking papers into his briefcase. "Well, that was unexpectedly painless. Given what's happening with the ethics board, we could probably have pushed for even more favorable terms." "No," Sarah said firmly. "The settlement is fair. I don't need or want to capitalize on his professional destruction, regardless of what he deserves." Harrison studied her with newfound respect. "Most clients in your position would feel differently. Most clients haven't spent decades studying what vengeance does to the human spirit," Sarah replied with a small smile. "I just want to move forward, Harrison. Clean break, fresh start." As they prepared to leave, Sarah's phone rang. Dr. Patel's office. She answered immediately, her heart rate accelerating despite her outward calm. "Sarah," Dr. Patel's voice carried an unusual excitement. "I've just received your latest test results. Your cancer cells have decreased by nearly 70% since we adjusted the treatment protocol." Sarah gripped the phone tighter. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we're approaching what could be classified as remission," Dr. Patel replied. "But I need to discuss something important with you. There's a clinical trial at Dana-Farber for a new immunotherapy approach specifically targeting your type of leukemia. Given your response to the current treatment, you'd be an ideal candidate." Sarah listened as Dr. Patel outlined the trial. Innovative, promising, but requiring her to make a decision within 48 hours. The timing was critical. If she waited until her next scheduled appointment next week, the trial slots might be filled. "I'd need to review the protocols, discuss the risks," Sarah said, her academic mind automatically shifting to analytical mode. "Of course," Dr. Patel agreed. "I've already sent the documentation to your email. But Sarah, this could be significant. The preliminary results suggest potentially complete remission in cases similar to yours." Complete remission. The words hung in the air like a promise. Just months ago, Sarah had been preparing for the worst. A measured decline, a life cut short by both disease and betrayal. Now, unexpectedly, she faced the possibility of a future she hadn't dared imagine. "I'll review everything tonight," she promised, "and I'll call you tomorrow with my decision." As Sarah ended the call, she noticed William watching her from the hallway, his expression unreadable. She wondered how much he had overheard, whether he understood the potential turning point this represented in her medical journey. "Good news?" he asked, moving cautiously closer. "Potentially," Sarah replied, seeing no reason to hide it. "My treatment is working better than expected. There's a clinical trial that might improve the prognosis further." Something flashed across William's face, relief mingled with what might have been regret. That's wonderful, Sarah. Truly." For a brief moment, the accumulated pain and betrayal between them seemed to thin, allowing a glimpse of the people they had once been to each other, partners who had genuinely cared about each other's well-being before ambition and selfishness had corroded that foundation. The moment shattered as Rebecca appeared at the end of the hallway, her expression thunderous. "William, the board wants to see both of us now. Something about conflicts of interest with my company." William's face hardened again, the vulnerable moment gone. "I have to go," he said simply. "I know," Sarah replied. As he turned to leave, she added quietly, "William, I hope your son gets the care he needs, whatever happens with the pregnancy." He paused, visibly startled by her compassion. "Thank you," he said finally, before hurrying toward the new crisis demanding his attention. Sarah watched them go, noting the distance between them as they walked, physically close but emotionally worlds apart. Whatever fantasy had led William to destroy their marriage was clearly disintegrating under the weight of reality. Outside the courthouse, rain had begun to fall, washing away the day's oppressive heat. Sarah tilted her face upward, letting the cool drops touch her skin. For the first time in months, she felt completely free, not just of William, but of the burden of anger and betrayal she had carried. The divorce was settled, her health was improving. The future, which had seemed so constrained by illness and heartbreak, now opened before her with unexpected possibility. As Marianne pulled up in her car, Sarah took one last look at the courthouse where her marriage had officially ended. Rather than grief, she felt a profound sense of completion, of a necessary chapter closing so that a new one could begin. "Ready to go home?" Marianne asked, as Sarah slid into the passenger seat. "Not home," Sarah decided suddenly. "Let's go to the university. I want to visit my office, see what needs to be done before the fall semester." Marianne shot her a surprised look. "You're thinking about teaching again already?" "I am," Sarah confirmed, the decision crystallizing as she spoke it aloud. "Life is too unpredictable to put things on hold indefinitely. If Dr. Patel approves, I want to teach at least one seminar in the fall." As they drove through the rain-washed streets toward campus, Sarah's phone chimed with a message from Elena. "Breaking news. Ethics Board has suspended William pending full investigation. Rebecca seen leaving hospital in tears. Thought you should know. This doesn't change your settlement, but thought it might give you closure." Closure. Sarah considered the word as she watched Boston pass outside the window. What she felt wasn't the neat packaged resolution that closure suggested, but something more complex. A recognition that life rarely provided clean endings, only transitions from one state to another. William's professional downfall wasn't her victory. Rebecca's distress brought her no satisfaction. Instead, Sarah found herself thinking of her manuscript, the document that had begun as personal therapy and evolved into something she now believed might help others facing similar betrayals during health crises. "I need to finish my book," she said aloud, surprising Marianne. "Not just for myself anymore. There are others who need to hear this story." "The betrayal story?" Marianne asked, navigating through traffic as the rain intensified. "No," Sarah replied, understanding the distinction clearly now. "The survival story, the reclamation story." She gazed out at the city, at the life continuing all around her, despite storms both literal and metaphorical. That's what matters in the end, not how we're broken, but how we reassemble the pieces. As they approached the university gates, Sarah's phone rang again. The display showed an unfamiliar number with a New York area code. "Sarah Morgan," she answered, expecting perhaps a call from Dana Farber about the clinical trial. "Dr. Morgan," came an unfamiliar voice. "This is Emma Richards from Beacon Press. Your colleague Dr. Bennett shared some of your manuscript pages with our editorial team, and we're extremely interested in discussing publication possibilities for When He Left. Do you have a moment to talk?" Sarah shot a questioning look at Marianne, who shrugged innocently as she parked the car. "Yes," Sarah said into the phone, a strange new excitement building inside her. "Yes, I do have a moment." As rain drummed on the car roof, Sarah listened to the editor describe how her personal narrative could become a resource for others, patients facing medical abandonment, women rebuilding after betrayal, individuals reclaiming agency during health crises. The manuscript she had begun as private therapy might become a lifeline for others. The pain William had inflicted might be transformed into purpose. The story she had lived might help rewrite the stories of countless others. When the call ended, Sarah sat in stunned silence, processing this unexpected development. "I might have sent a few pages to my publishing contact," Marianne admitted finally. "I hope you're not angry." Sarah turned to her friend, tears mixing with laughter. "Angry? How could I be angry about this?" In that moment, as rain washed the summer dust from the city and new possibilities unfurled before her, Sarah understood the true nature of healing. Not a return to what was before the wound, but a transformation into something new, something that honored the pain while refusing to be defined by it. The divorce was final. William's carefully constructed new life was collapsing around him. And here sat Sarah, weakened by cancer, yet somehow stronger than she had ever been, facing not just survival, but renewal. She thought of her roses, how they required pruning, cutting away the dead to encourage new growth, how the healthiest plants often came from the most aggressive cutting back. "Let's go to my office," she said to Marianne, reaching for the door handle. "I have a book to finish and a clinical trial to research." As they stepped into the rain, Sarah felt the cool drops like a blessing, washing away the last residue of a life that no longer fit, making space for whatever came next. A future she would shape on her own terms, unfrozen at last. October painted the Boston Common in a riot of red and gold, the autumn light casting long shadows across walkways where students hurried between classes. From her office window on the third floor of the English department, Sarah watched the seasonal transformation with newfound appreciation. 6 months ago, she hadn't been certain she would see another fall. The clinical trial at Dana-Farber had proven more successful than even Dr. Patel had dared hope. After 12 weeks of immunotherapy combined with targeted treatments, Sarah's latest scans showed no detectable cancer cells. The word remission had been spoken with cautious optimism at her last appointment, though Dr. Patel had been careful to emphasize that continued monitoring would be necessary. "Professor Morgan?" A tentative knock accompanied the voice of her graduate assistant, Lily Chen. "Your 1 o'clock is here." Sarah turned from the window, smoothing the tailored navy blazer that still hung a bit loose on her recovering frame. "Send them in, please." The door opened to reveal Emma Richards, the Beacon press editor, who had transformed from an unexpected phone call to a dedicated champion of Sarah's book over the past 2 months. Emma entered with her usual brisk energy, setting down her leather portfolio and removing her red wool coat. "Sarah," she greeted warmly, "you look wonderful. The new treatment must be working." "Better than expected," Sarah confirmed, gesturing toward the sitting area she'd created in her office, 2 comfortable armchairs flanking a small table, far more inviting than talking across her desk. "Tea?" As they settled with steaming mugs, Emma produced a bound manuscript from her portfolio. "The final draft with all the edits incorporated. We're ready for your final approval before it goes to production." Sarah accepted the document, running her fingers along the cover page. When He Left, a memoir of medical abandonment and reclamation by Sarah Morgan, Ph.D. Seeing her story rendered in such tangible form sent a wave of complex emotions through her. "The advance copies for reviewers are already generating significant interest," Emma continued. "The New England Journal of Medicine wants to excerpt the chapter on patient advocacy, and 3 women's magazines have requested interviews for their spring issues." Sarah nodded, still processing the reality that her private pain had transformed into something with potential to help others. "And the legal department is confident there are no issues." "Completely. You've been careful to focus on your experience rather than making accusations. Plus," Emma added with a slight smile, "Dr. Morgan signed away any right to contest your account as part of your settlement agreement." The settlement. It had been finalized just days after that rainy afternoon at the courthouse, the documents processed with unusual speed. Sarah had received everything Harrison had negotiated: the house, the financial package, lifetime health insurance coverage, along with William's signed letter to the ethics committee acknowledging his inappropriate actions regarding her medical coverage. "Have you heard anything more about William?" Emma asked carefully, aware of the delicate territory. "The press inquiries have mentioned the ethics investigation." Sarah sipped her tea before answering. "The board concluded their investigation last week. William has been placed on indefinite administrative leave from his surgical duties, though he's permitted to continue teaching and research under supervision." What Sarah didn't add was what Benjamin had told her privately, that William's prestigious research grants were being reassigned to other department members. that his name had been removed from consideration for a national medical award, that the carefully constructed career he had prioritized above all else was effectively in ruins. "And the baby?" Emma asked softly. Sarah set down her mug. "Born 3 weeks ago. A boy. The chromosomal issues are significant. Down syndrome complicated by a heart defect that required immediate surgery." She paused, the information still strange to convey. "William performed the surgery himself. Benjamin says it was flawless work." "That's..." Emma seemed at a loss for words. "Complicated," Sarah finished for her. "Like most real human stories." Emma nodded, understanding the deeper truth in Sarah's words. It was this nuanced perspective, the ability to acknowledge the complexity of betrayal without simplistic villainization, that had drawn the publisher to her manuscript in the first place. "The final chapter still needs your approval," Emma said, gently redirecting the conversation. "We've left space for an epilogue about your current health status, if you're comfortable including that." "I am," Sarah confirmed. "I want readers to know there can be life after both cancer and betrayal. Not always, not guaranteed, but possible." After Emma left with the approved manuscript, Sarah remained in her office, watching the afternoon light shift across campus. She had reduced her teaching load to one graduate seminar for the fall semester, focusing her energy on recovery and the book. The department had been surprisingly accommodating, perhaps influenced by her newly prominent status as the author of a forthcoming book from a prestigious press, perhaps out of genuine compassion for her health challenges. Her phone chimed with a text from Marianne. "Champagne and takeout tonight to celebrate the final manuscript." Sarah smiled, typing back her agreement. Marianne had been her constant through everything, the friend who had moved into the guest house during her worst treatments, who had championed her manuscript to publishing contacts, who had never once suggested that forgiveness might be easier than holding William accountable. As she prepared to leave for the day, gathering essays to review over the weekend, a distinctive knock sounded at her door. 3 quick raps, followed by a pause, then 2 more. Only one person knocked that way. "Come in, Benjamin," she called, unsurprised when William's colleague entered, looking slightly harried as always. "I was on campus for a lecture," he explained, settling his lanky frame into the chair Emma had vacated. "Thought I'd see if you had a minute." "For my favorite medical spy, always," Sarah replied with a small smile. Over the months, Benjamin had evolved from an unexpected ally to something approaching a friend, their shared concern for ethical medical practice forming a bond neither had anticipated. Benjamin's expression turned serious. "I wanted you to hear this from someone who cares about you, rather than through hospital gossip. Rebecca has left." Though surprised by the timing, Sarah couldn't claim to be shocked by the news itself. "Left Boston?" "Left William," Benjamin clarified. "And the baby. She moved out 3 days ago, left a note saying she never signed up to raise a special needs child. Williams filed for emergency full custody, which will obviously be granted given the circumstances." Sarah absorbed this information in silence. The scenario was so predictable it might have seemed contrived in fiction. The younger woman abandoning the man who had abandoned his wife, the karmic echo almost too perfect. Yet the reality involved a newborn with serious medical needs, an innocent caught in the wreckage of adult failings. "How is William handling it?" she asked finally. Benjamin's tired eyes reflected genuine concern. "Not well. He's hired around-the-clock nursing for Nathan, but I've never seen him so lost. The professional sanctions, Rebecca leaving, the baby's needs. It's a perfect storm." Sarah nodded, understanding the unspoken question beneath Benjamin's words. No, she would not celebrate William's downfall. No, she took no pleasure in his suffering. The anger that had fueled her initial survival had long since burned away, replaced by something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition of the fundamental brokenness that drives people to break others. "There's something else," Benjamin continued, his voice dropping slightly. "William asked if I would give you this." He withdrew an envelope from his jacket pocket. "He said it's not an excuse or an attempt to change anything, just something he needed you to know." Sarah accepted the envelope without opening it, setting it on her desk. "Thank you for bringing it, and for everything else these past months." After Benjamin left, Sarah stared at the envelope for a long moment. William's handwriting was instantly recognizable, the precise, slightly slanted script of someone trained to make even their penmanship perfect. She considered leaving it unopened, preserving the clean break the divorce had established. Instead, she carefully broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of William's personal stationery, covered in his familiar handwriting. "Sarah, I understand there is nothing I can say to undo what I've done, nor would I insult your intelligence by trying. This is not a request for forgiveness or reconciliation. I want you to know that Nathan's heart surgery was successful, but his recovery will be complicated. The irony is not lost on me that I now face a lifetime of medical challenges with my son after abandoning you during yours. Rebecca left 3 days ago. She won't be coming back. Another irony, that I destroyed something real for something that proved imaginary. Your book publication was announced in the hospital newsletter. I want you to know that I will never contest anything you've written. The truth deserves to be told, however uncomfortable for me. The oncology department tells me your treatment has been remarkably successful. I am genuinely glad. The world is better with you in it, something I failed to appreciate when it mattered most." William Sarah refolded the letter carefully, returning it to its envelope. There was a time when such words from William would have meant everything, when his acknowledgement of wrongdoing might have seemed like the beginning of healing. Now they were simply information, neither healing nor harming her reconstructed sense of self. Outside her window, a gust of wind sent a shower of red and gold leaves swirling across the campus green. Sarah watched them dance in the autumn light, thinking of the roses in her garden at home, pruned back now for winter, their bare stems waiting patiently for spring's renewal. Her phone rang, interrupting her reflections. The display showed Elena Rodriguez's number. "Elena," Sarah greeted warmly. "How's the new position?" After completing her law degree, Elena had accepted a fellowship with a national patient advocacy organization, focusing specifically on cases involving medical abandonment during serious illness. "That's actually why I'm calling," Elena replied, her voice animated with professional excitement. "The foundation wants to establish a formal support program for patients facing what you experienced. They're looking for someone to develop guidelines, maybe even write a handbook. Your name came up immediately." Sarah listened as Elena outlined the proposal, a part-time consulting role that would leverage both her academic background and her personal experience to create resources for vulnerable patients. The timing would work perfectly with her teaching schedule and the book launch. "They're hoping you might consider heading a symposium in the spring," Eleanor continued. "Medical ethicists, patient advocates, legal experts, all discussing how to better protect patients from financial and medical abandonment during health crises." By the time the call ended, Sarah had agreed to at least explore the possibility. The symmetry felt right somehow, transforming her personal trauma into systems-level change that might prevent others from experiencing similar abandonment. As twilight settled over campus, Sarah gathered her things and prepared to leave. In her bag, alongside student essays and teaching notes, she placed William's letter and the final manuscript pages, past and future sitting side by side, neither defining her, but both part of her evolving story. The walk to the faculty parking lot took her past the university hospital complex where William had built his career. Light glowed from windows where medical dramas, large and small, unfolded daily. Lives saved, lives lost, ethical choices made in pressured moments. Somewhere in that massive building, William Morgan was likely bending over patients, his skilled hands performing the work that had once defined him, his personal life in shambles around him. Sarah felt no triumph in his downfall, no vindication in the poetic justice of Rebecca's abandonment. What she felt instead was a profound sense of having survived something that had threatened to destroy her, not just cancer, but the equally insidious disease of betrayal that had metastasized alongside it. Her car was where she'd left it that morning, dusted now with fallen leaves. As she unlocked it, her phone chimed with a text from Dr. Patel. "Lab results just in. All markers remain clear. Officially calling this remission. Congratulations, Sarah." The words blurred on the screen as unexpected tears filled her eyes. Remission. The goal that had seemed almost impossible 6 months ago, when William's betrayal and her diagnosis had crashed into her life simultaneously. She sat in her car, allowing the emotion to wash through her. Not just relief about her health, but a deeper recognition of all she had survived and rebuilt. The drive home took her through neighborhoods transformed by autumn glory. Sarah found herself thinking about the concept of seasons, how nature embraced cycles of death and renewal, how nothing remained static, how even the harshest winter eventually yielded to spring. Her own life had moved through such seasons, from the stable summer of her marriage with William, through the sudden autumn of betrayal, into the winter of illness and isolation, and now emerging into an unexpected spring of renewal. At home, her roses had been trimmed back for the approaching winter, their bare stems protected against coming frosts. Sarah had learned to prune them herself, another small independence reclaimed. Marianne's car was already in the driveway, and through the kitchen window, Sarah could see her friend arranging takeout containers on the dining table. Before going inside, Sarah paused in the garden, touching one of the bare rose stems. Beneath the apparently lifeless wood, sap still flowed, nutrients still moved through hidden channels, preparing for renewal that would come with spring. The rose wasn't dead, merely dormant, conserving energy, shedding what wasn't needed, waiting for the right conditions to bloom again. In that moment, surrounded by the evidence of nature's resilience, Sarah understood something essential about her own journey. What William had done, the betrayal, the abandonment, the calculated cruelty, had indeed changed her, but not in the way he might have expected. Rather than diminishing her, the experience had distilled her to her essence, burning away accommodations and compromises to reveal her core strength. The Sarah who entered her warmly lit home, who embraced Marianne with genuine affection, who would soon publish a book that might help countless others navigate similar betrayals. This Sarah had been forged in the twin fires of illness and abandonment. The resulting woman was not undamaged, but she was undiminished, perhaps even enlarged by what she had endured. To remission, Marianne declared later, raising her champagne glass, and to new beginnings. To survival, Sarah amended, clinking her glass against her friend's. In all its forms. As they celebrated, Sarah's thoughts drifted briefly to William. Alone now with a special needs newborn, his career in tatters, his calculated exit strategy unraveled. There was tragedy in his story too, different from but connected to her own. The man who had abandoned his wife during her greatest need now faced his own greatest need in isolation, experiencing the very vulnerability he had refused to honor in her. Later that evening, after Marianne had gone, Sarah sat in her study reviewing her calendar for the coming months. Book launch events, the patient advocacy symposium Elena had proposed, follow-up appointments with Dr. Patel, her teaching schedule. A life rebuilt from fragments, different from what she had planned but perhaps more authentic, for having been consciously chosen, rather than merely inherited from earlier expectations. On her desk sat a framed photograph she had recently rediscovered while organizing old papers. Sarah and William on their wedding day, both looking impossibly young and hopeful. She had considered discarding it, but decided instead to keep it as a reminder not of what she had lost, but of how thoroughly she had survived its loss. Next to the photograph lay the final page proofs of her book, the conclusion she had labored over for weeks. The truest measure of survival is not the absence of scars, but the presence of growth beyond them. I carry the marks of both illness and abandonment, physical changes from treatment, emotional recalibrations after betrayal. These are not defects but evidence. I was here, I endured this, I continued. William's leaving nearly destroyed me, not because I couldn't exist without him, but because his abandonment came when existence itself was in question. To face mortality alone after believing you would face it accompanied is its own unique trauma. Yet paradoxically, that very abandonment forced me to discover resources within myself I might never have otherwise known existed. I write this not from a place of perfect healing. I don't believe such a state exists after profound betrayal, but from a place of genuine reconstruction. The life I have built in the aftermath is not a pale imitation of what was lost, but something new entirely, more intentional, less accommodating, fiercely authentic. Betrayal, like cancer, changes you at the cellular level. You cannot return to who you were before the diagnosis, before the abandonment. But you can become someone new, someone who incorporates the experience without being defined by it, someone who understands that the frozen moments of crisis eventually thaw, revealing not just pain, but possibility. My roses still bloom in the garden where we once walked together. I tend them alone now, but not lonely, surrounded instead by chosen connections rather than inherited obligations. Their beauty reminds me daily that growth follows pruning, that winter yields to spring, that life persists despite frost's attempt to arrest it. This is not a story of forgiveness. Some actions lie beyond that grace, Rather, it is a story of reclamation, of health, of agency, of self. William left, taking with him the future I had imagined, but in doing so, he inadvertently cleared space for a future I would never have dared create, while cushioned in the false security of his presence. For that unexpected gift, the chance to discover who I truly am when everything familiar is stripped away, I am paradoxically grateful, even as I recognize the cruelty of how it came. In the garden of my life, what remains after such severe pruning is only what was most essentially mine all along. Sarah closed the manuscript, satisfied with the conclusion. It offered neither neat resolution nor bitter revenge, but something more truthful, the recognition that some endings cannot be made beautiful, only meaningful. Outside her window, the October wind picked up, sending more leaves swirling from the maple tree in her yard. Winter would come soon, with its own challenges and stark beauty. Sarah would face it differently than she had faced winters before, alone yet surrounded, changed yet whole, wounded yet healing. In the garden, her pruned roses stood ready for whatever came next, their bare stems containing all the possibility of future blooms. Like Sarah herself, they had been cut back to essentials, dormant but alive, waiting for the right conditions to flourish again. If this story touched your heart and you want to keep following inspiring and moving stories, be sure to check out our upcoming videos. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on new content that can brighten your journey and provide valuable insights. Join us and keep exploring stories that truly matter. I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will touch you as well, so click on it now and we'll see you there.